So welcome everybody to Need to Know H-1B info, latest updates. As of a few minutes ago, we're gonna try to include it all. My name is Sophie Alcorn and it's a pleasure to be here with you today. We have an hour set aside and I have a jam-packed session of information and updates that I'm very excited to share with you. So to introduce myself and Alcorn Immigration Law, we are a leading immigration law firm for tech startups and scaling technology companies. We're based in Silicon Valley, and we're very proud of our recent successes over the last 5 years, including helping thousands of clients from I think 60 or 70 countries. Our H-1B approval rating is almost 100%. We get RFEs issued at about 1/3 of the national average, and we have a really high success rate with visas and green cards for extraordinary ability as well. So happy to share with you the latest updates and also some hacks and tricks that I've been developing, obviously within the bounds of the law, but creative strategies that you can use to make hiring international talent easier and to support your growing team with retaining top talent using immigration as a benefit. So just to share a little bit about the Alcorn story and how I started the team. I'm a second-generation immigration attorney. My dad was also a California immigration lawyer who practiced for almost 40 years, starting in the 1980s. And when he passed away, I really wanted to carry on his legacy and his mission. So I founded Alcorn Immigration Law here in the Bay Area. And we use a time-proven method to really support our clients. And when I founded the firm out of my kitchen 5 years ago, when my kids were 1 and 4, I thought that there was a need to have nice immigration lawyers helping people and communicating. And it's been my pleasure that this has supported us to win for so many of our clients, even in today's circumstances. So our mission, I will share with you, is to overcome borders, expand opportunity, and connect the world by practicing compassionate, cutting edge, and rigorous immigration law in service of the betterment of humanity. So whatever your immigration needs are, we've got you covered, and we welcome you to reach out at any time with your questions. And just a little bit about me. I am a board certified specialist in United States Immigration and Nationality Law by the State Bar of California Board of Legal Specialization. This is like a doctor getting a board certification. There's an extra mini bar exam. You have to help hundreds of clients in very niche areas of the law. So I'm really proud of that designation. And I often write, I have a weekly column for TechCrunch, and recently we began the Immigration Law for Tech Startups podcast, which you can subscribe to as well. And I could not do this were it not for an amazing team of inspiring people who care so much about our clients because of their own personal immigration journeys and being married to immigrants, or like me, being the child of an immigrant. So for us, it's really personal, and that's why we do it. And over the last several years, as Alcorn has grown, we're really fortunate to have partnerships and collaborations with top global universities, accelerators, incubators, VCs, and to be in the news to help transform and share the immigration, change the immigration narrative in the country. So I have a lot of modules to go into with a lot of technical legal information throughout the course of this hour. I know we have a wide audience. Some of you are corporate immigration HR people in companies, some of you are CEOs, some of you are individuals, perhaps you're being sponsored by a company, and maybe some of you have dreams of starting a company. And what you all have in common is that we have these things called borders in the world, and there's no global citizen of the world passport yet. So we have to find ways to deal with borders systematically and consistently so work can get done, companies can get built, and innovation can happen. And I already see people starting to have questions, so that is wonderful. I do welcome your questions throughout today. We have a question and answer panel, which you are welcome to use in Zoom. And I will answer your questions at the right time in the presentation as it fits in with the materials. And I will also be saving some time at the end to go through any extra questions that you may have. So if you have any questions now that you're coming to this webinar with, you're welcome to put them in the Q&A panel, and feel free to add them in as they come up throughout today. So given that we have a lot of people of a lot of different backgrounds and familiarity with immigration, I'd like to set the stage by providing some immigration context. So why do we care about H-1Bs? How does this play into the holistic picture of immigration from the perspective of one person who is working in tech from their journey? So here's the typical path. And basically, before a couple years ago, people were shocked when I would say this, but now it's kind of a necessity that everybody know this, I think. Most people tend to believe that you have to get somebody a visa first to come here, and then they can apply for a green card after a few years of working through the business process of immigration, and then they can apply for citizenship. And yes, this is often the way that many people choose to pursue this, but this is a matter of policy and preference. It is not a legal requirement for somebody to have a visa before obtaining a green card. So, especially now in these pandemic times where we are stuck in our various corners of the world, if you or your company has a long-term plan for somebody to come here in the next couple of years, know that it is entirely possible to skip ahead straight to the green card process, even if that future employee is overseas right now. If you want to just skip getting an H-1B and wait a couple years for them to get a green card, if they can qualify to get a green card in a couple years, that is certainly a possibility. I just want you to know that there is no requirement for somebody to have a visa before they are eligible for a green card. So if you're a tech company and you have a bunch of fantastic engineers in Ukraine, it's been a little hard these days to get visas, so you could potentially just start green cards for them if they're a valuable asset to your company. So let's talk about how this, though, typically plays out in the United States. Most of our international STEM workforce here has found their way to the United States as university students, whether it's for undergraduate or a master's degree or a PhD. They come on an F1 visa attending a US institution. And there's about 1 million international students in the US at any given time. So of this population, most of them, there's also J1, which is another way to be a student, but most of our international students are on F1, and that's a student visa, and it provides a few opportunities for people to work at various stages of their journey. And we're still setting the stage to talk about all of the latest craziness in the news with immigration changes. I just want to lay the foundation so it all makes sense. So for an F1 student, they have the opportunity to get something called curricular practical training, which is dubbed CPT, and that's a way to work for an employer and be paid before they graduate. There's another way to work before somebody graduates called F1 OPT, and it's the pre-completion version. Most international students typically save their OPT for after they graduate, so 1 year post-completion OPT. And then if the student studied in a STEM field, science, technology, engineering, or math, then they may be eligible for an additional 24-month, 2-year STEM extension to get an additional EAD card, which is a work permit. It's an employment authorization document. And one of the cool trends over the last year that we saw with a lot of business schools is that they reformulated the curriculum so that students could take data science classes, and thus the MBA degree would now qualify as a STEM degree. So if you're a recent MBA grad, definitely check with your school to see if your degree counts for STEM OPT. And if you're an employer seeking to hire recent MBAs, know that if you work with certain business schools, those students will be eligible for 3 years of OPT instead of 1 year of OPT. And so then it's the hope and dream of most of these international students who have graduated and are now on some form of OPT to be sponsored by a company for an H-1B, which is the most historically clear path to getting a green card as a professional and living and working in the United States. And historically, most companies have waited for somebody to get on H-1B first through the lottery, and then they would initiate the green card process by potentially going through PERM, which is a labor condition a labor certification where you're testing the job market to see if there's any able, willing, and qualified US workers to take the job instead. If you can't find any, then moving on to the I-140 petition and then the I-485 adjustment of status. And at the end of all that, somebody gets a green card, and then if they want, they can become a citizen after that, either after typically 5 years of having a green card or 3 years of having a green card if you've been married to a US citizen that whole time. Now, there's several ways to get green cards. I'm not going to dwell on this too long, but just so you have the holistic picture of everything that's happening, we basically have 3 ways to get green cards in the United States. There's business green cards, which I'm sure most of you are familiar with, like PERM, EB2, EB3. It's also the EB1A, extraordinary ability goes in there. All the EBs mean employment-based. And then we have family-based green cards for immediate relatives, spouse, and children and parents of US citizens. And then also there's a visa bulletin for some other family categories. And then every year there's also a free diversity visa lottery. People get confused because there's 2 lotteries in immigration law. There's this one, which is the green card lottery, and it does matter which country you were born in, but that's different from the H-1B lottery, which I'm going to tell you a little more about soon. The H-1B lottery is not affected by your country of birth or country of citizenship. So one thing, no, I'll save it for the end. I'm going to touch back on green cards a little bit later. Okay, so now that we've covered like the 30,000 foot view, now let's zoom in a little bit more on H-1Bs and how they typically work. So to put this into context, an H-1B is for a specialty occupation. And you may have heard that word a lot in the news this week because one of the new regulations has to do with making the definition of a specialty occupation more specific so that fewer jobs qualify. But it basically means it has to be a professional job. It has to be a job that requires somebody to have a bachelor's degree in the field that this particular candidate has studied for them to be able to qualify. And if the person didn't complete a bachelor's degree, that's okay. You could use work experience from the field as well. So 3 years of work can be equivalent to 1 year of education. So you can use that as well. And then the other thing that's been in the news a lot is that this issue of the prevailing wage. And this is also very important for early stage startups. So there's two parts about money that go into this. One is the prevailing wage, that the worker must be offered the wage of that job at their level in their local geographic location. And my interpretation of the way this was originally written into law was actually as a way to protect vulnerable international workers from being taken advantage of by mean, stingy US companies that might be trying to pay them less than Americans would make. It's kind of a different legal background than the perm labor certification process, which is to protect Americans from international workers taking their jobs. So anyway, there's basically a minimum wage that each person in an H-1B has to be paid. And I will touch on more on that soon, but that is one of the places with this week's orders that has been affected. For each wage level, there is now a higher prevailing wage that must be paid to qualify for an H-1B. The flip side of this money coin is that the company must also have the ability to pay. So for an early stage startup, one of the effects, I was just interviewed by Business Insider this morning, and what I was saying was, this will make it harder for very early stage tech companies with limited pre-seed funding to be able to hire people on H-1B, because for the same, if they have, let's say they receive 200 or 500K of investment, now they need to allocate more of that towards the founding team member who is on H-1B towards their salary. So I think there's a way to pitch investors about that, but this, it's all interconnected. The company must have the ability to pay the prevailing wage. If you're a very early stage company and you're pre-revenue and you don't have investment yet, no runway, may still be possible to get an H-1B. I did that for an IoT company a few years ago based on a business plan. So with the right documentation of the validity of your company, there are other ways to argue these things. So now, the other really important thing to put H-1Bs in context is that the total number is limited by Congress, by statute. This is in the law. There's 65,000 H-1Bs available every year, and there's an additional 20,000 set aside for people who obtained advanced degrees in the United States. And because the demand is so high every year, there is a lottery. Now, one of the really great things that I appreciate about the Trump administration and the way they benefited people in getting H-1Bs, people who have invested into a US education, is that a couple of years ago, they flipped the order of the lottery. So now, basically, if you got a master's or PhD from the United States, you kind of get 2 bites at the apple each year in the lottery because you get a higher preference. They've kind of been schizophrenic about their approach. Some of the things are good for business and good for our clients, so we appreciate it. Okay, so there's a lottery. So then the duration and the timing comes into effect. So quick lottery update, if you've gotten an H-1B in 2020, you're already aware of this, but earlier this year, pre-COVID, they switched to a wonderful electronic lottery system. This is another thing I really appreciate that makes it easier, especially for small businesses and tech startups, to participate. Instead of needing to hire the immigration law firm to prepare the whole H-1B before you even know if your candidate has gone through the lottery or even has a chance, which made it, much harder for early stage tech startups to participate. Now we have this electronic registration system. Instead of filing in April, as was historically the case, now there's a registration period in February, and you got to get everybody's names in March. And Then there's an electronic lottery that happens in April. And this year, because of COVID, not all of the H-1B people who were selected ended up using their chances at H-1B. So there was actually like a second refill, top it off kind of a lottery that we went through in June, where more people got selected for H-1Bs. Now, with any new H-1B, the start date at the very earliest is always going to be the following October 1st. So last week we had the start date for the people who participated in the electronic lottery starting in March. So if you have more candidates who need to be sponsored for brand new H-1Bs that you want to put through the lottery, we're also going to talk about how to get an H-1B without going through the lottery, which is very exciting. But it's probably to your long-term advantage to also pursue an H-1B through the lottery. So just keep in mind, you know, we're here in October now. If you already know who you're going to be sponsoring next year in March, it's never too early to tell your immigration lawyer, but at the very latest, it's good to get organized on that in like January, February at the very latest. So there's this electronic lottery, people get selected in April. Then if you have been selected, that is when you file the actual paper petition and filing fee checks to the government. So it's your call if you want to engage your immigration law team before the lottery to prepare H-1Bs for everybody across the board. So for the people who got selected, you can file them right away. Or if you want to wait, see who got selected, prepare, it'll take a little bit longer. The critical thing though is for CAP-GAP, which is the next bullet point here. CAP-GAP is a special regulation that applies to people who are in their last year of OPT or STEM OPT. So let's say somebody's OPT is going to expire on June 15th of 2021. And they get selected in the lottery on April 1st. Well, you might have until June 30th to file their H-1B, but if you wait, they will miss CAP-GAP. Their petition needs to be received by USCIS before June 15th when their OPT expires, and then they're allowed to keep working for you until October 1st while they're waiting for the answer about their H-1B and whether it got approved. And if they're still pending past October 1st, they can be in the US while they're waiting, but they can't keep working for you. So just keep that in mind for any candidates whose OPT is ending. And typically an H-1B is valid up to 3 years. The first one's usually valid for a shorter amount of time, just based on the process and the documents we have to obtain from the Department of Labor to start the H-1B process. But it's up to 3 years at a time and up to 6 months, up to 6 years total. And if you want to keep somebody on longer than that and you've started the green card process for them before their final year of the 6 years of H-1B, so you should really start at year 3 or year 4 at the latest. But when you reach certain green card milestones for the PERM or the I-140, then they're allowed to get additional H-1B extensions beyond the 6 years, which is AC-21, this great law that allows workers to stay here longer. Lots of information. I'm gonna take a quick sip of water. Okay. And I see great questions coming in about passports and layoffs and H-1B transfers and timing and OPT. So I will definitely reserve time at the end to go through all of these questions. And somebody asked if we could get in touch on LinkedIn. By all means, you can find me and connect with me, Sophie Alcorn, and you can also follow Alcorn Immigration Law. And we post all of our webinars on there. We're going to have one in a month about the outcome of the elections and what it means for U.S. immigration policy. So yeah, that'll be an exciting one to prepare for. Okay, so now I think we have most of the H-1B basics covered. Now let's take another step more zoomed in and focus on how H-1Bs have been affected in 2020 with COVID-19 and our pandemic. So first of all, there's something I need you to know about, which can help if anybody is in a precarious immigration situation because of an oversight or an overstay or a missed deadline. There's this thing called special, well, there's a couple things, but special situations, these permit extensions, and there's also expedite requests. So scenario, somebody got laid off from their big employer on March 1st. Their 60-day grace period was going to end sometime around April 30th. They got a new offer from a new company on April 10th, and the new company put in an emergency instruction to the law firm to prepare the H-1B transfer petition to be filed before the end of the 60-day grace period on April 30th. April 29th rolls and the candidate was like, sweet, got this, I'm good, it's gonna be fine, I can take a deep breath. This is a true story from somebody who called me. April 29th, got a call from the recruiter from the new tech company that was supposed to hire them saying, so sorry, we just had a round of layoffs, we have to rescind your offer and we can no longer file your H-1B petition. Well, this person's grace period was expiring the next day. So they were in a special situation due to the pandemic and COVID. So, you know, because flights were limited and dangerous and everybody was stuck here, you know, the strategy there is to late file a new H-1B for a new employer, asking for forgiveness and mercy because of this unforeseen course of events due to COVID being a special situation. If you have a long pending petition or application, you could also seek an expedite request if for some reason you need an answer right away. So usually that's based on extreme financial loss to a US company. That would be a way to make an argument if you need something sped up. Now, another thing about H-1Bs is if we're all working from home, and I'm not actually having a picnic at the Golden Gate Bridge. I've got the hamster cage from the kids in the background. But if you're working from home, this is a new address that needs to be taken into consideration on an H-1B. So for any existing team members who are currently working from home and on H-1B, just make sure with your immigration lawyer that the home address, which is that now the work site, lines up with the LCA and the prevailing wage, and check if you need to amend anything on the H-1B. And I would say as a best practice moving forward, probably indefinitely, as long as working from home is a thing, just proactively include a home address on the I-129 petition for any future H-1Bs that you file, because you will and can keep filing H-1Bs. It is still possible to employ people on H-1B, regardless of what you might be reading in the news. But just include that home address on there, and then make sure that whenever, if you're in HR, whenever your employees move and update their addresses, you're going to need to chat about whether the work site needs to change on the H-1B. Now, another thing that's happening is that travel is opening. Travel is affected by the country, by the country in which you have most recently physically been in before entering the United States. So if you don't have citizenship or a green card, then you have to look at where you've spent the last 14 days. And if you've been in China or the Schengen area of Europe or Brazil, you're not allowed to come straight in. So we've had clients take a little vacation and sip some quarantinis in Mexico and Bali and Dubai and other neutral locations that are not subject to that 14-day entry restriction when they're coming into the United States. And okay, now consulates are reopening, but it's not equal. And I'm going to be talking a lot more about H-1B visa interviews shortly. Emergency visas are possible. That's usually like somebody's dying. Some consulates are just simply, not open yet, but some are. We just had somebody go through a successful visa interview in Ireland this week. So it depends on the country. We have access to a database to determine like the latest updates on which consulates are functioning. And I will be speaking more on this specifically about H-1Bs in just a minute. So, immigration in the news, right? This is a huge topic this week. We could not have picked better timing for this webinar when we planned it 2 months ago. I just hope that us having this webinar didn't cause all of these changes to happen, but I don't think it did. So, okay, so let's step back again. So we have this H-1B scheme. You get your petition with USCIS, and then when the person's outside and needs to come in, they need to obtain a valid H-1B visa to do so if they want to come in. So one of the executive orders at the beginning of COVID, may have been in June. It still felt like the beginning of COVID, but this year time has been so weird this year. It's hard to keep track of time. Like something happened a year ago and I thought it was 2 years ago. But basically, there was a presidential tweet where it was stated that like people will not be allowed to get new visas to come back in because we got to protect Americans. So a lot to say there, but I will focus on the practical legal effects. Basically, people seeking H visas, J visas, and L visas and their spouses were no longer able to get visa interviews. So we were seeing that the consulates were closed, so this had no marginal effect at the time. But as some consulates opened and people could seek other types of visas like O1 or E2, now these visas have been left out. So one of the interesting exceptions on here for J1 researcher visas were not banned by this rule. So if you want somebody to come work for you for 5 years as an international researcher, that was never part of this ban, but H-1Bs were. So that was the rule. And then there were all of these national interest exceptions that were issued. And people have started to get visa interviews and visas issued if they have some of these factors. So for people who wanted H-1Bs or Ls or restricted J-1 visas, if they could show that they were health professionals or that there was an interested US government agency, or that they had to return home to continue working, or they were a specialist or a manager or an expert, or if they were in the US critical infrastructure sector, or a high wage on the LCA, higher than required, or that the company was facing financial hardship, either one or some combination of these factors, depending on the particulars, were what would be required to get a new visa interview with a national interest exception. But then, this is me, then last week, there was a judge in my local federal court jurisdiction, the Northern District of California, who issued an injunction in a lawsuit with TechNet, which is a big tech company association, and notably the US Chamber of Commerce, saying, I am stopping the government, including USCIS and the State Department, from following the executive order. Therefore, anybody who works for a plaintiff company and needs an H-1B, L, or J visa interview at a consulate that would otherwise be restricted can no longer be prevented from scheduling that interview. So you can find this article on Yahoo Finance, and we'll send it to you. So when I read, first I was so excited. I was like, oh my God, everybody can have these interviews. And then I read the order and realized that they can only make the injunction pertain to the plaintiffs, the people who sued. But then I read the complaint, which kicked off the lawsuit, the motion for the preliminary injunction, and the judge's order about the preliminary injunction, and realized that nobody defined the plaintiffs in a time-based way. So here's my theory. You're welcome to try it out. Here's the process and the strategy. If you need a visa interview and you're with a company that's not part of this lawsuit, TechNet seems really hard to join. I think it's like an invite-only organization with Google and Apple and Facebook and those guys. But the U.S. Chamber of Commerce accepts for $250 an annual membership of any U.S. small business. So my strategy that we're now starting with our clients is join the U.S. Chamber for $250. Then you've become a member of the plaintiffs, and therefore you qualify to be part of this preliminary injunction, and your employees can now get visa interviews. If you try this and it works, tell me. If you try this and it doesn't work, tell me. I think there's a really strong legal argument to be made here. It should work, and you can engage us or your immigration attorney to prepare a letter explaining why you qualify and to be able to do this. So that was very exciting. Now, okay, so I'm going to go through this kind of quick because I have a lot and there's a lot of amazing questions, and I'm going to stay on the webinar longer than our cutoff date, our cutoff time of noon, because I see a lot of really great questions and I want to make sure to answer all of them. So here's the updates of the moment. There's two. One is that the definition of specialty occupation is narrowing. This is an interim final rule. They are requesting comments. It's kind of a mess. We're still unpacking it, but this means that, okay, look, here's what this means. All this means is if you want to hire somebody on an H-1B, you need to engage with a smart immigration law team that will research your desired duties and help make sure that they are classified legally, properly, and strategically, so that whatever job this person needs to accomplish in the United States is encompassed by this new definition of specialty occupation. That's the practical thing that this means, and it's different for every type of job, every SOC code, but it's the same legal process that we as attorneys do to support our clients that we've always done. So there's really no change here. Practically, but there's fear mongering, right? Everybody got scared. So then the other one is the prevailing wage. And this one already took effect. The new database is up and live, and we're doing some analysis for a TechCrunch article of like before and after wages and how much they were affected. They have gone up. You know, for current employees not affected, this is for any new H-1Bs that are started as of now. So you just have to look it up for each person. What is their current actual wage? What was their H-1B classification? What was the wage at the time in the LCA? What level were they at? What is, you know, and for future filings, for extensions, for amendments, what is the new wage? How does it compare? There's ways to work around this, like if you can't afford the new wage, but you still need the person, you can't afford it at 40 hours a week, you know, maybe they now only work 37 hours a week in the new H-1B, right? It's a ratio. There's different ways to do it and to handle it. And I think for big companies, you know, this is just a marginal drop in the bucket compared to like all the benefits and things. for small companies that are raising VC funding, early stage, I think it just becomes a matter of pitching to your investors why these specific talented individuals require these wage levels. And if we're talking about people that are inventing the technology, that's the basis for the company, I think it's a pretty strong argument that that would be deserved, even if the other members of the founding team are only making 60K. There's always ways to negotiate it and work it out, right? You also have equity that you're playing around with. So what does it all mean? It means that we have a Republican president who wants to get votes from Americans who believe that that the world is a zero-sum game where if some people gain, then other people lose, and that therefore, to gain these votes, they take actions that harm American employers that are going to create jobs for Americans. That's my political interpretation here. I mean, the ironic thing, I was interviewing a VC yesterday for the podcast, and she was saying something like there's a 5x multiplier, like for every job that goes to a talented international person at an early stage tech company, it ends up having like a 5x return on the number of jobs that are created for Americans down the road. So, and I just personally think that if we can do anything to support one person to have a better life, it makes the world a better place for all of us. Okay, so now I could not do this webinar without a brief shout out to Green Card Updates, because this is happening right now. There's this thing called the Visa Bulletin. It exists because our laws are based on racial quotas from the 60s, where we limited the number of green cards that could go to people from each country per year. So there's like a wait list. It's kind of like standing in line at a deli and you take a number and you wait for your number to be called. The Visa Bulletin is like having your number being called, and every month the State Department updates it. And so the beautiful, crazy, amazing, weird thing that happened this month is that for EB1, 2, and 3 green cards, there was dramatic forward movement in the final action dates. This is like who can qualify to have their turn in line overseas, and then also who can file. So you see that, if you weren't born in China or India, everybody else is current in EB1, 2, and 3. So everybody's trying to get their I-485s filed ASAP before October 31st, or hopefully the Visa Bulletin won't retrogress next month, but and revert to the longer waits. But we saw this about 6 or 8 years ago, and it was really great for all the people who could file that month. And you see for people born in China and India that the dates substantially move forward as well. And then you also get to check the USCIS interpretation of the Visa Bulletin, which is who can file their I-485s and which chart they're paying attention to. So for October, for employment-based, they are looking at the dates for filing chart. So this one, so if you have a priority date prior to one of these, definitely figure out if you can file an I-485 this month. Okay, now I have to talk about hacks and alternatives. So this is really, really wonderful, amazing, amazing news. There's a way to get an H-1B at any time of year without a lottery for any worker who is at a company in the US, regardless of what type of company that is. If you want to learn more about this, you're welcome to email us. I'm happy to put you in touch. There's a nonprofit that is running an educational program for leadership and development to support diverse international diverse US community college and university students who don't have access to perhaps like high quality STEM education in their universities. So this foundation has a partnership with several US universities whose students need to be taught in their classes and have projects to work on to get hands-on experience. So the way it works is, if you want to hire somebody and let's say their OPT is running out and they didn't get selected for the H-1B lottery, here's what you do. You contact us, we'll put you in touch. You can nominate this international person as a global talent fellow. If they get selected, then they will be responsible for leading a group of students in a leadership and development program that the students do work that benefits a project at your company. This is for 5 hours a week. It's virtual. The international person doesn't have to be a good teacher. They just have to know their field. And then this foundation gets the person a cap exempt H-1B to do 5 hours of work a week with this university. Because it's supporting a US university, they don't have to go through the lottery. They get that first H-1B locked in. It takes about 2 to 3 months. Once it's approved and in place, you have your second concurrent H-1B ready to go. You file it right away. They're going to work at your company for another 35 hours a week. And then you file it. And as soon as your second H-1B is received by USCIS, they can start working at your company right away because they are already in H-1B status. So it's really, really exciting. It benefits the international worker because they get to improve, on leadership and management abilities. It benefits your company because, like, A, you get the person to be able to work for you and they don't have to leave the country. And B, they're running a team of students that are all volunteering to help you to gain experience. And then, you have access to an even greater labor pool of people who know your company and believe in it. So I'm super excited about this. It's the same thing that you may have seen. We've worked with the Global Entrepreneur in Residence program at several universities for startup founders. Same legal concept. It's just that program has been really hard for them to scale because, there's only so many universities that have like one spot for an EIR. And so turnover and applications for that program were hard. But this is another version. It's very scalable. And I'm just so excited about it. Okay, more hacks and alternatives. There's so many other visa types. It's not just about H-1B. That's the one that's in the news, but there's so many more. We're going to give you this chart that covers a breakdown of the biggies for Silicon Valley. But if you just look on the left, there's O1 extraordinary ability, TNs for Canadians and Mexicans, E3s for Australians, J1s for researchers, interns, and trainees. Depending on the ownership of your company, maybe E2 and E1. There's H1B1 for Chile and Singapore. There's so many options. Please don't give up. Please, where there's a will, there's a way. And oh, I forgot the link. But we will also send this to you. We've just launched something called Extraordinary Ability Bootcamp. It's a 15-module class that I teach. It's like 8 or 9 hours of instruction time with a lot of infographics and templates and things you can use. But this is for anybody to be able to qualify for an O1A visa or an extraordinary ability or national interest waiver green card. So we're really excited about it. It's to guide you through all of the prongs of evidence to be able to qualify and not have to go through PERM or be able to self-petition a green card or have another workaround from the H-1B and get an O1. So it's very, very exciting. Now, other hack or alternative, if your person who you need to sponsor is not from India or China, this could work. If they're married to somebody who's not from India or China, this could work. Basically, they can't be stuck in the really long India or China line for a green card. As I said earlier, there's no requirement that you get them an H-1B before you sponsor a green card. So for really top talented recent graduates who have OPT and STEM OPT ahead of them, we have seen on several occasions that we're supporting them to go straight to a green card with the help of their company. And there are many, many categories in which to do so. We're also seeing companies support their employee well-being and happiness and immigration status by funding their marriage-based green card process. Look, if somebody has a legit relationship with a US citizen, this is like, in less than a year, they can get a green card. It's, you know, maybe half or a third of the cost of one of the business options. It's so much less complicated. So we have several companies that step in and provide this to their employees a benefit because it's actually a lower investment for a better reward for their highly valued team member. I also started a nonprofit this summer. It's called the Community for Global Innovation. We're working on our 501c3 status right now, but we have tons of student volunteers. We welcome more. This is a community to unite innovative tech companies with highly talented global students and recent grads, providing emergency funding and assistance for students who don't have enough money to get a plane ticket to go home. And also letting the students know, like, here are great companies to apply to that aren't going to discriminate against them based on their immigration status, so that everybody has a chance to follow their dreams. So many things to cover. So excited to support you. And now I'm gonna start taking some of your questions. So thank you so much for attending. You're welcome to stay on as long as you would like. And just before I go to the questions, would love to say that, you know, if you ever have any immigration questions, we have an amazing team and we're more than happy to support you to create a strategy that will allow you to reach your goals for yourself or your employee or your company. Don't believe the fear mongering. Immigration is still totally possible. It's just the scapegoat of the election. And, you know, one day with your support, maybe I can change the law somehow and make it better for all of us. But I'm going to go to your questions now. Thank you so much for asking them. And I do prefer if you put questions into the question and answer panel. I saw some in the chat window, but it'll be easier for me to organize them in the chat window. So I'll dive right in. So somebody asked, what is the process for going to the US with a passport? What other documents are required? Well, this is where you would need a visa or a green card to attend. And if you're from Europe or Japan or Australia or some countries, you can qualify for ESTA, the 90-day visa waiver program, to come as a tourist or business interview without a visa. But for everybody else, you need a visa or a green card. There's tourist visas. Those are hard to get these days, but we'll send you this chart that talks about, you know, which options might be right for you. Here's another question. Thank you so much for your kind words. And this question is about H-1B transferability, timing, challenges, and issues. This person writes, many of us have been laid off recently due to COVID and are trying to figure out how to find a new employer and transfer the H-1B to this new employer. So, you know, I'm hopeful that with CFGI, we're going to be able to launch like a job database of companies that are willing to hire and do H-1B transfers. For now, there's a website I know about called, I think if you Google My Visa Jobs, you can actually see through like a Freedom of Information request all of the companies that have sponsored H-1Bs. So you might be able to focus your efforts on seeking jobs at those companies. That might be a way to streamline it. And just keep in mind that 60-day grace period. An act of generosity and kindness that I saw recently this year was that somebody with a small consulting firm offered somebody a job for like 20 hours a week as a part-time consultant as a way for them to stay in the US and keep maintaining their H-1B status. So you might also look for an opportunity like that. But then we just have to be really careful that you're meeting all of the H-1B requirements, because if it's like outsourcing, those are the H-1Bs that have been under really extreme scrutiny in this administration. But there was another recent lawsuit that helps companies. So just get an offer and we can figure it out. Next question. I came to the US on an F1 student visa. After graduating, I worked for my present company for a few months on OPT and then moved to the H-1B once it got picked. I now have my I-140 for a green card. If I want to pursue a full-time MBA in the US, do I have to move back to the F1? After finishing the MBA, will I be eligible for OPT again? Do I again have to participate in the lottery to get an H-1B? So it depends. You need to talk to your school to see if they will allow you to study while you are in H-1B. Excuse me, if they'll allow you to work while you're in H-1B status. If you want to work and you're still fulfilling your H-1B requirements, there's no barrier to you pursuing your H-1B at the same time. But if you want to go to full-time MBA and not work, you can no longer be an H-1B. You'll have to go back to F1. If you did not previously get a master's degree, then you should be eligible for OPT again. I would recommend looking for a business school that offers STEM OPT as well. And you will not have to participate in the lottery to get a new H-1B in the future because you have that I-140 and priority date. Good luck. Great. Okay. Now a question. I'm on H-1B living in Silicon Valley. I read yesterday that the minimum wage has been increased. My green card is not being applied yet. Since this minimum wage is increased, I feel that my American dream will be shattered, as my H-1B extension will be denied since my minimum wage will not be met. My wage level before yesterday was level 2, but now I think it will be level 1. Is there a way around this minimum wage, and what's the best way to start my green card? I don't want to leave the US, as every immigrant has an American dream. Thank you. We can figure it out. Let's just take it one step at a time. First of all, it is my current understanding, based on what I've read so far, that the new interim regulations are about H-1Bs. Don't know how they're going to affect the green card process, but we'll figure it out. There are certain green cards that do not involve perm or prevailing wage, notably the EB-1A, extraordinary ability, EB-1B researchers, EB-1C, multinational managers, and EB-2 NIW, national interest waiver. So it may be possible to get in line for a green card in one of those categories without getting a labor certification. You should be fine to stay here on your current H-1B, and maybe there's a way to tweak your job if your employer can't pay you more to be able to be in level 1 for the future, but don't despair. Everything is possible. I want you to keep your American dream. My co-founder of the nonprofit was saying that, like, the death of dreams can be one of the most severely limiting and depressing things. And that's why we wanted to start it. But please keep your dream. It is definitely possible. We can find a way. Okay, thank you. Next question. This is from somebody from Pakistan looking for an H-1B sponsor, a software engineer with 13 years of experience, including 8 years in Malaysia. I would recommend looking at that My Visa Jobs website that I previously mentioned. Here's another one. I'm on OPT, not STEM, just regular. It expires May of 2021. It's difficult to find a job with H-1B sponsorship right now. Any suggestions or advice on the next steps? Not sure if doing a master's degree would be a good option due to the immigration changes. Thank you for your question. So May of 2021, it would be ideal if you could find somebody to sponsor you in the H-1B lottery next year. If you can't, or if you can be self-employed right now. If you can't find a sponsor, you'll have the 60-day grace period until sometime in July of 2021. You could enroll in a master's program. There's some that have like day one CPT, which gives you work authorization in the program. If you're looking for a master's program, there's a couple of things to look for. One is if you already have a master's, you can't get more OPT, but if you haven't had a master's yet, then find a program that will not only give you regular OPT, but also STEM OPT. And, you know, additionally, if you're attending because you're in the startup world, there's a lot of founders of tech companies who start companies with other people and raise investment and are able to get an H-1B at this company they've founded, as long as we can show that there is an employer-employer relationship and the company has the ability to pay. So, you know, that could be another choice on your menu. The one caution I would urge about enrolling in another program is that USCIS, or not USCIS, Department of Homeland Security a couple years ago created a fake school to trick international students in enrolling in it, and the fake school didn't meet any of the legal requirements. So like 50 or 100 students spent their money on this fake school and then ended up having to leave the country. So triple check that whatever school you want to enroll in meets all of the requirements for CPT and F1 and I-20s. Okay. Next question. Elaborating on permit extensions. I think this is that special situation slide that I said. If the ex-employee does not yet have a new employer, can they extend the grace period? No, you can't formally extend the 60-day H-1B grace period, but what you can do is once you file the new H-1B, you can have the attorney argue that the lapse was a special situation. Now that travel is more possible and you might be able to go back to your home country, it might be safer to leave and come back in later. But that is something that we would have to figure out on a case-by-case basis. Here's another one. I love all your questions. What's the difference between applying for the transfer of the H-1B before the end of the grace period versus after the grace period is expired? Well, after the grace period is expired, you are out of status. It is not supposed to be allowed for you to transfer. But if some unfortunate thing happened, and that's the situation you find yourself in, you can beg for forgiveness and mercy, but you don't necessarily know if it's going to come through, which is why I suggested to the last person that it might be safer to leave and come back in, but don't do any of those things unless you pay to consult with an immigration attorney who can advise you on the specifics of your situation. Okay, here's another question. I'll have a sip of water first. Thank you all for hanging on and staying. We've got about 20 more questions to go through. We'll try to do rapid fire and see if we can wrap it up by 12:30 so you can all go eat lunch if you're in Pacific time. All right. I changed status from O1 to H-1B this year. Am I affected by the executive order in terms of getting a visa stamped at some consulate? So here's the questions I would ask. Do you have a valid O1 petition still? Do you have a valid H-1B petition, and how long is it valid for? Do you have a valid O1 or H-1B visa in your passport for multiple entry from a previous visa interview? What country are you from? Do you have to travel internationally? Which country could you potentially go to for a visa interview? Once we clear all of that, and then I'm sure that we need to get you an H-1B visa for some reason, then I would ask, okay, what's your company? And if they're part of TechNet or like the US Manufacturers Association or the US Chamber of Commerce, you're definitely protected by the injunction that would have stopped you from getting an H-1B visa. If you have to go get an H-1B visa, you would be affected even though you previously had an O1. But if your company joins the US Chamber of Commerce, you might still be able to get a visa appointment. But I'm really not suggesting that anybody voluntarily leave the US just for the purpose of doing a visa interview right now. It's still too sketchy and uncertain. Here's a question. If you change employer for the H-1B, do you need to interview again? Do you need to show a national interest exception? Well, if you're in the US, you don't have to. You just transfer your H-1B to a new company. If you're outside of the US, it depends if you have a valid visa or not. If you don't, you would have to go through another interview and then either show the national interest exception or be part of that, plaintiff class of the US Chamber that I mentioned. Okay. Here's a great question. Do the changes to specialty occupation definition and wage computation also apply to other employment-based visas, such as the E3 for Australians? Yes, they do. The wage computation definitely does. I'm looking at it right now. It applies for H-1B, H-1B1, and E3. And I believe that specialty occupation does as well. Yeah, we'll send all of you some information about the CAP exempt H-1B and basically if you're interested in that, you're welcome to email us hello@alcorn.law. It's in the bottom left, and we'll be happy to screen you for that and introduce you to our partner foundation that's handling that. Here's somebody. I live in SF. I obtained an H-1B, but I don't have the visa in my passport. I need to travel during December. What do you suggest I do? I would suggest you carefully reconsider how important and urgent it is for you to travel internationally, because if there's any way to avoid it, I still think that would be in your best interest. If you absolutely must depart the United States, then we have to think about your itinerary, where you're going to go, and which consulates might be open for you to attempt to get an H-1B visa. But it's still risky. I think this injunction is great for people who have been stuck outside the US and are waiting to get in. But if you're here now, I still don't advise you leave for like pleasure travel. Okay, here's another one. Can you also do the CAP exempt H-1B after the 6-year period of being on an H-1B? That is a wonderful technical question, and I don't know. We'd have to look up whether you have to spend a year outside first. If you have AC-21 protection, probably not, but we can check that out for you if you want to email us. Here's one. H-1B exemption loophole. Wow, that's cool. What's the timing from A to Z, and how competitive is the application to join as a fellow? And what are the costs involved other than admin fees? Yeah, it's super cool. It's so exciting. It can be done in like 2 to 3 months. So if you have an offer now for a company, you could get, screened and placed as a global talent fellow and have that H-1B go through with premium processing and then file the H-1B for your new company right away. So it's conceivable that you would start in like 2 or 3 months at your company in this CAP exempt status. I think, the application process and the competitiveness, this foundation is really excited about opening up education opportunities to US students that can't currently receive them. So, they want to make sure that you qualify for an H-1B and that your company is on board with the program and that you'd have some good projects with your company that the students could volunteer to engage in and learn in their coursework. But it's definitely possible, and I welcome you to email us. We can make sure that your company qualifies and connect you. The foundation does have fees for the service, and I can connect you with them so that you can talk about that and what it would be for your situation. Okay, here's another one. My wife is a pediatric cardiologist. Can we file her green card in the EB1 category? We'd be happy to take a look. It's quite possible, and we have a questionnaire that we would be happy to send to you so that she can, or you can support her to fill that out about her accomplishments, and we can screen if she is a candidate for EB1A. Here's one. When is Esta coming back? I don't know. That's one I don't know. We can take a look. If you don't have it and you need it and you can't get it, email me and I'll help diagnose it for you. I don't know everything though. Here's one. What's the process to get an OPT extension? Well, for the STEM OPT extension, you have to file an I-765 with a training plan detailing how your continued role at your company will advance your educational objectives. We prepare those for companies and OPT individuals all the time. We'd be happy to support you with that. Here's one. When would you estimate the U.S. consulates abroad could again be opening to apply for an E2? Hopefully soon. We have filed one recently, well, several, but one of ours is pending in Australia. These normally could easily take pre-COVID times like 6 weeks to 4 months before your interview is scheduled, because they have to go through all the details of your business and investment before they schedule you. But it depends on your country, and I can look that up for you. So please reach out to us. We'll be happy to let you know. Here's one on the EB5 investor visa. Is the requirement that the minimum investment is now 900,000 or 1.8 million? Yes, those are the amounts for an EB5 now. That's correct. Here's one. Being on H-1B with an I-140 approved, can I support my wife on H-4 EAD in any way if she starts her own business? Yes. I don't know what you have in mind, but if your wife is starting her own business, that will be a US company that could potentially do visa or green card sponsorship. So happy to flesh that out more with you based on whatever your goals are there. What are the minimum hours to keep somebody in H-1B status? It's not really defined. So your H-1B could be for a very low amount of hours every week. There's a requirement that if the wage is less than 60K, there's additional duties on the employer, but it can be for a low amount of hours. Here's one. I read on the embassy's site in the pandemic that to use the visas we already have, we should apply online. Does that mean we can't get in the country if we don't go to the embassy again? I don't know. I think I don't understand your question. If you have a visa, you can come in if you still meet the conditions for the visa. And if you don't have a visa, you probably have to go get a visa, which requires an application to the consulate. Here's one. If I do PhD in STEM while working, does it help me to get the green card quickly in EB1? Perhaps. You're welcome to take our Extraordinary Ability Bootcamp and think about how your portfolio of accomplishments now or in the future might fit into those EB1 categories. It is very common for international folks with PhDs to leverage the things they do in the PhD program, research, publications, peer reviewing, conference committees, those things to meet the EB1 criteria. Here's another. How easy or difficult is it to incorporate a startup on an H-1B? I understand I won't have an employer. However, is there a workaround for this? Does the country of citizenship have any implications? Anybody can own a company in the United States, whether you're in the US or outside, whether you have an H-1B or you're a citizen or you're undocumented, anybody can own a company here. If you're on H-1B, you just can't work at your company that you created. So if you're creating a startup, what we need is like a founding team or a board of directors so that we can create the requisite employer-employee relationships so that you can legally be employed at this company, and your country of citizenship has no bearings on the process. Here's another. How to re-enter the United States if a student who has done his master's in a STEM field leaves the United States without making use of OPT. Well, it depends on if you have a valid visa, like a B1, B2, or an F1. If you want to come back in F1, you would probably have to enroll in a new program and get a new I-20. You could also apply for another type of visa from outside of the United States if you have a job offer at a company. You could come in to work. Does the new wage level affect cap exempt H-1Bs? Yes, it does. It's for all H-1Bs. Here's one. How easy or difficult is it to incorporate oh, we did this one already. Cool. All right, here's one. I am currently on my OPT STEM extension post getting my undergraduate degree. Do I have the option to more OPT and STEM extension if I choose to go to do a master's program? Yes. You get up to 3 years after your bachelor's, up to 3 years after your master's, up to 3 years after your PhD. Now we have a Canadian citizen on an F1 visa for grad school, soon to be graduating. Congratulations. Unable to land a position in the American media industry. Do media companies take on international students? Many companies want employees with unlimited work authorization in the US. So a couple things. You'll probably get OPT and you could freelance as like a reporter or something in your first year of regular OPT. As a Canadian, you can skip the H-1B, you could get a TN. There's also a special I visa for members of the foreign press working in the United States. And you could also consider creating your own company on an E2 investor visa, or creating a Canadian company and transferring here in L1 status. So there's several different routes you could take. Now, speaking of the TN for Canadians and Mexican citizens, here's somebody on a TN. Is there any way to get a green card, or do I need an H-1B first? Okay, a TN is a non-immigrant status. It's for people who do not intend to get green cards. So when you are applying for a TN, if it's your intent to get a green card, then that's a reason that your TN should be denied. If you are traveling in and out on an existing TN and you come in with the intention of seeking a green card, that's a reason for them to deny you entry. If you've been stuck in the United States for 9 months because there's a global pandemic, you haven't been able to go in and out, your TN status is valid, and you have no intention of traveling internationally, and since your last arrival, your plans have changed, and now you want to seek a green card, that is technically allowed. So the risk is you're not going to be able to travel, and it might be challenging to renew your TN in parallel with your pending green card process. But technically, no, you don't have to get an H-1B to get a green card. Most tech companies want to be more conservative. They'll require you to do that. But if you have a small employer or they really love you, it might be worth negotiating that if you don't need to travel internationally. I just completed my undergrad in the US from India. How can I get a green card if I don't have an employer to sponsor and not much to invest? You can take our Extraordinary Ability Bootcamp and seek an EB-1A green card after you've built up some accomplishments. My son was just watching a video about the Oyo hotel founder in India who's like become a billionaire at the age of 24 and who had 50 cents 4 years ago. So anything is possible, but basically if you can pick a field and get some success and recognition in it, you can then qualify for an EB-1A green card. The boot camp goes through all of the criteria and what you need for that. And this would allow you to seek a green card by yourself without marriage, without investment, and without an employer. And this one is, if somebody is willing to sponsor an H-1B, is there a minimum number of hours that the person needs to work? I would recommend like 5, 10, 15, 20 hours a week, somewhere in there, like a part-time job. That should be fine. And then the last question somebody asked is, can you post a link to the boot camp? And I believe that Edith has supported me to do that. The boot camp, just to clarify what it is, it's about how you can build your portfolio of accomplishments so that you can legally qualify and meet the evidence requirements to seek an EB-1A green card in the future, so that when it's time to hire an attorney to prepare everything for you, that you have enough evidence and you will actually be able to get it. I'm just going to check through the chat window to make sure we got through all of the questions, and I think we did. You can see in the chat window, boot camp, we're giving a discount to today's attendees of this webinar. And we'd love to support you for anything you need help with now or in the future. So please consider me a resource. Thank you to so many of you for staying with me for this extra bonus 25 minutes, 50% more content for your time. It's a pleasure to be here with you. Thanks for all your great questions. Glad to support you. Please subscribe to the podcast. It's been a lot of fun recording it. And we recently have been on the leaderboards in India and Japan and the UK and Burkina Faso. So that's very exciting. And follow us on social media because we post a lot of updates about everything that's going on. So thank you so much. I hope you have a wonderful day, and please be well, do good work, and keep in touch. Thank you so much, everybody. Bye.